Tonight, we're traveling back to the year 1812, to wide, muddy roads stretching into infinity. Uniforms that look sharp but feel cold, and one man standing at the height of his ego, brushing off frost like it's a minor inconvenience. You're here in the midst of an empire that spans almost all of Europe, and if you're hoping to stay warm, you probably won't survive this. Picture it, the hum of restless horses, the clatter of boots on cobbled streets, and a silence hanging just beyond the horizon, the kind that comes before something terrible. This isn't just a war story. This is the story of a bad idea dressed in medals and marching boots. Napoleon Bonaparte, General Emperor, man of many jackets, has just decided to invade Russia in summer with an army of over 600,000 men, and no one dares to tell him no. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the city of Dresden. It's June, the air is damp, and everything smells faintly of wet stone, horse sweat, and the overconfident perfume of empire. You're just one of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, diplomats, cooks, engineers, clerks, and camp followers gathering for a campaign whose scale you can't quite comprehend. Napoleon stands atop the empire he built with maps, blood, and extremely detailed spreadsheets. He's won every battle that counted at Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. He's reshaped Europe's borders like a child pushing food around a plate. And now, Russia, massive, cold, inconvenient Russia, has decided not to play by his economic rules. Time to teach them a lesson. Historians still argue whether Napoleon genuinely believed Russia would fold after one big show of strength, or whether he knew he'd be in for a long haul and chose to gamble anyway. What's certain is that his ego and his memory had parted ways. He remembered triumph. He forgot winter. You can't help but notice how tidy everything looks. Flags are crisp. Horses are brushed. Drums thump in that ever-comforting Napoleonic rhythm. Too proud to stop, too loud to question. But underneath the pomp, there's something else. Quiet, confusion. Most of these soldiers have no idea where they're going. Some think they're heading to Poland. Others say Moscow. A few whisper about Siberia. Whatever that is, and you're marching east because someone pointed and said so. As you walk, you pass Austrians, Prussians, Italians, Saxons, Bavarians. The Grande Armée is an international mess held together by sheer force of will. Not all the men speak the same language, and many don't particularly want to be here, but they march anyway, boots slapping against packed dirt, eyes fixed on the back of the next man's head. Napoleon's command center hums with activity. Orders written in beautiful cursive flow like rivers toward distant corps. Clerks break their quills over supply lists. Engineers argue over bridge routes they've never seen. The emperor himself stalks the headquarters in full dress, not for war, but for theater. Always the image, always the hat. That hat, black bicorn, worn sideways, iconic, dramatic, and just thick enough to offer no protection from anything but a mild drizzle. It's been immortalized in paintings, sketches, and Halloween costumes ever since. Historians debate why he always wore it like that. sideways, low over the brow, but most agree it was part identity, part branding. You could spot Napoleon in a crowd instantly. That's exactly how he wanted it. Of course, it didn't help in Russia. But we're not there yet. Tonight, you're drifting in this moment of tense calm, the gathering of something enormous, like the breath before a thunderclap. You see men kissing their wives goodbye, officers laughing too loudly at jokes that aren't funny, campfires flickering across muddy hills, and horses shifting nervously as if they already know the countryside is green and wide, stitched with shallow rivers and crooked trees. The roads wind toward something unnamed. Villagers watch from behind wooden fences, trying to guess what kind of storm this parade might bring. Some smile, some hide. A local baker, crusted with flour and soot, mutters to himself, "Fools. They think they'll just march through Russia like it's Prussia." But no one listens to bakers when drums are playing. The army leaves behind a mess, spent hay, broken wheels, spilled ink. Even now, before a single musket has fired, it feels like things are beginning to fray, and yet you can't help but be swept up in it. There's something almost hypnotic about the scale, the sheer number of boots, buttons, voices. You're part of a machine, and the machine believes it is unstoppable. Remember, no one thinks this is going to be the disaster. It becomes, at worst, a difficult campaign. At best, a grand pageant of power that ends with a Russian treaty and perhaps a nice fur coat. You, dear listener, walk on through the soft rattle of carts, the low murmur of marching songs, and the distant flicker of lightning over the plains. What lies ahead is unimaginable, but for now the empire marches, the hat stays on, and the sky holds its breath. Death. From the Crimean coast to the cities of Italy, from the markets of Paris to the farms of Flanders, something is coming. It will not roar like a battle or blaze like fire. It will whisper, it will seep, and it will remain. This is not just the story of a disease. It is the story of how a world tried and failed to understand the unknowable, of how medicine, mysticism, and desperation entwined. It is the story of the Black Death, and of those who tried to stand between it and the living in this journey. We will walk not through gore or horror, but through consequence, through silence, through the strange rhythms of life and death that defined an age. We will meet the doctors in beaked masks. We will enter quiet homes with shuttered windows. We will feel the weight of unanswered questions, and we will glimpse in the ashes of a collapsed world the fragile beginnings of another dot. So find a quiet place. Let the present soften around you, and step gently with me into the dim, flickering candlelight of the past. You wake before the sun, or rather, you're woken by the creak of wagons, the thud of boots on frozen earth, and the grumbled swearing of a corporal who just stepped in something unfortunate. The camp is a sprawl of canvas, smoke, and movement. Somewhere a pot is already boiling thin soup, maybe, or coffee if you're lucky. The Grande Armée is preparing to move. Over 600,000 men. That's the number everyone repeats, but no one can quite imagine what that truly means. It's more than just soldiers. It's a wandering city made of iron, wool, and desperation. You've got infantry, cavalry, engineers, farriers, medics, cooks, blacksmiths, bakers, bridge builders, translators, scribes, shoemakers, and at least one man whose entire job is to write down what the other men are doing wrong. It's a masterpiece of chaos, tied together with ink, brass buttons, and the emperor's will. Historians still argue whether Napoleon actually intended to take such a massive force all the way into Russia, or if it ballooned out of control like an overfilled carriage. What's certain is that his empire had grown too large to maneuver easily, and he was about to find out just how unwieldy it had become. As you trudge forward, you pass units from across the continent. The French soldiers march with practiced pride, the Italians sing loudly and off-key, the Poles, perhaps, march with the most energy. Many believe a French victory could help re-establish their own country, which at the moment exists mostly in songs and hopeful glances. The logistics alone would make your head spin. Imagine feeding this many mouths every day, not just humans, but over 200,000 horses as well. The army travels with bakeries on wheels, entire convoys of flour, barrels of salt meat, wine, vinegar, tools, nails, needles, ink, and paper. They say Napoleon once brought along a personal library of over 1,000 books. Another time, he included a full silver service set just in case dinner needed to be imperial dot. And then there's the cannon. Hundreds of them, beautiful, polished, and very, very heavy. Each one requires a team of horses, trained gunners, and carts of gunpowder. And every single one of those needs to roll across dirt roads that will soon turn to sludge. But again, no one thinks of that now. The army spreads out in waves, some units a full day's march apart. Messages take hours to arrive and longer to be understood. You start to realize that this isn't one army, it's a loosely connected swarm. And while Napoleon's mind might be sharp enough to grasp the whole thing from above, you can't even find your canteen. Orders come down through a hierarchy so complex it would make a modern office printer blush. Divisions become corps, corps split into brigades, brigades into battalions, battalions into weary lines of men staring at the horizon. Every mistake made at the top takes days to reach the bottom, by which point the mistake has usually married a cousin and started a small vineyard in a nearby line. A young soldier fiddles nervously with the strap of his backpack. He's just 17, and this is his first campaign. His boots are too tight. He hasn't yet learned how to fake confidence. He smiles when you glance his way, but his fingers tremble just a little. You wonder, for a moment, how many of these men will make it back. A quirk of this campaign: the further you march east, the less people seem to know what's going on. The maps become vague, the villages turn to dots. Even the officers stop pretending they know exactly where they are. You hear rumors that the Russians are retreating without fighting, burning their own villages as they go. That can't be right, you think. Who burns their own homes? But it is right, and it's only the beginning. You pass through Poland, or what used to be Poland, depending on the day. The land is flat and damp, full of reeds and swarms of biting flies. There's little shade and even less enthusiasm. The locals are skeptical. You sleep in barns, in hay, in shallow ditches by the road. One night it rains so hard your shoes float away. You find them again in the morning, filled with something that smells like disappointment. The rhythm of the march becomes hypnotic. Left foot, right foot, mud, dust, breath, silence. Orders come in bursts, shouted and echoed. Form, column, make camp, boil water, stop scratching. And then there's the gear. You carry a pack that contains everything. Extra socks, cartridge box, mess tin, tent cloth, knife, thread, dried beans, pipe, tobacco, and sometimes, if you're lucky, a small letter from home that smells faintly of soap. The pack is heavy. The straps bite into your shoulders. But after the first week, you stop noticing. Well, almost. One night, while resting near a shallow stream, you hear someone mutter, "Why are we doing this?" No one answers, because no one really knows. Napoleon had given speeches, of course, about honor, glory, the need to humble the Russian Tsar. But speeches don't feed you. They don't dry your clothes. They don't stop the little blisters on your heel from growing teeth. But still, you march. The drums beat. The boots slap. The horses snort. The road stretches forward, always forward, like it's daring you to keep going. And so, you do. It's hot. That might surprise you. After all, this is the infamous Russian campaign, the one where everything freezes, including time itself. But here, in the long weeks before the cold sets in, you find yourself sweating through layers of wool and ambition under an unrelenting summer sun. The real problem is your uniform. Let's talk about fashion, specifically. Napoleonic military fashion, which, as it turns out, was not designed with practicality in mind. You'd think marching thousands of kilometers would call for comfort. Maybe some breathable linen, perhaps boots that didn't dissolve in rain. But no, you're wrapped in layers of heavy wool, brass buttons, epaulets, and depending on your rank, a hat that could double as a small boat. And at the top of this parade of poor tailoring is Napoleon himself, a man who genuinely believed image could win battles. His signature look, the bicorn hat worn sideways like a sandwich board for imperial branding. It wasn't warm, it wasn't waterproof, and it certainly wasn't aerodynamic. But it was Napoleon. Historians still argue whether he wore it that way to stand out in the chaos or simply to be painted more dramatically. Either way, it worked. You can spot him in any portrait like a theatrical punctuation mark, stern, short, and sharply hatted. You don't get a hat like his, of course. You get a shako, a tall, cylindrical contraption that somehow makes your head sweat and freeze at the same time. It's decorated with a plume that seems designed solely to collect rainwater. It's heavy, it's itchy, and it has an alarming tendency to fall off when you sneeze. Your jacket is tight, very tight. Tailors believed a snug fit built morale, but mostly it just restricts breathing. The cut is sharp. You look like a dashing figurine from a cake. You're wearing blue, or maybe green or white, depending on your regiment. The colors are bold. The comfort is theoretical. And underneath, no thermal base layers, no waterproof shell, just a thin cotton shirt, which has seen better weeks. Boots. Ah yes, the boots. They are stiff, heeled, and constructed by people who may have heard of walking, but perhaps didn't try it. There is no left or right, just boot. They mold to your feet over time, but before they do, they blister with alarming enthusiasm. You've stuffed straw inside to soften the blow. The straw has opinions. You smell like wool and worry. Everyone does. But still, you admire the officers. They wear sashes, silk linings, and gloves too dainty for any actual function. Some of them even powder their hair. There's one general who insists on changing his waistcoat daily, even while camping next to a swamp. And Napoleon, He's the picture of controlled flair, gray greatcoat. Even when muddy, it's deliberate. When he walks past, everyone straightens, not out of fear, but because he's still Napoleon. Here's the funny thing, though. He didn't dress like this to show off, not entirely. Napoleon knew that war was as much theater as it was strategy. He needed to be recognized instantly. If a soldier saw him on the field, the message was clear. The Emperor is here. You're not abandoned. But again, none of it keeps you warm. And the weather is shifting. At night, the air cools too quickly. Your breath becomes visible. Morning dew clings to your coat like a warning. You wake with damp sleeves and stiff fingers. The edges of your hat are crusted with frost. You're not freezing, not yet, but your body notices. It files the sensation away under. Prepare to suffer later. Quirky side note. Some soldiers tried to adapt their uniforms using whatever they could find. Scarves made of curtain scraps, gloves stolen from noble houses, fur linings stripped from officers, horses. There's even a rumor about a drummer who tied chicken feathers into his shako for extra insulation. He became a legend, or at least a walking pillow. The army, from a distance, looks glorious. Flags flapping, steel glinting, regimented lines flowing like ink across the countryside. Up close, it's a sea of patched trousers, mismatched buttons, and deeply offended toes. Soldiers cut holes in jackets to reach itchy spots. Some go shirtless under the sun, then shiver under the stars. A few wear civilian coats, scavenged from abandoned homes, draped over military pride like whispered apologies. And then it rains. Not a storm, not a gentle mist, just a long, soaking drizzle that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Your coat darkens, your shako sags, your gloves, if you had any, are useless. The roads become soft and uncertain. Your boots make a sucking sound with every step. There's a saying whispered in campfires now: Napoleon will conquer Russia, one puddle at a time. You march, drenched and stylishly miserable. One evening, as you sit by a half-hearted fire, someone jokes, maybe the Russians will surrender just to get a better look at our buttons. Everyone laughs, quietly, because there's truth in the absurdity. This army was built to look magnificent, but Russia doesn't care how you look. And your uniform, for all its epaulets and sharp creases, is just fabric, vulnerable, cold, and destined to tear. Still, you pull your collar higher. You press your hands under your armpits. You listen to the wind rattle the trees, and you wonder, how long can your feet hurt? No, not in the casual, I've been walking all day sort of way. They hurt in the I'm starting to believe my boots are trying to eat me sort of way. You've come to understand that marching isn't just a physical task, it's a quiet war between your will and your lower extremities. The Grande Armée continues to press eastward, and while the officers debate strategy and glory, the men debate socks, who has them, who doesn't, and whether stuffing bread inside your boots counts as innovative foot care. Let's talk logistics from the ground up. The average soldier is walking 20 to 25 kilometers per day, often more, over terrain that varies from hard-packed roads to soupy, wheel-rutted trails where wagons get swallowed whole. You're marching in two-day-old wet wool with a backpack that feels heavier than your horse if you had a horse. And your socks, assuming you still have a pair, are slowly becoming sentient. Historians still argue whether the French army ever truly had enough proper footwear to begin with. Some sources suggest Napoleon's quartermasters planned well, but were overwhelmed by poor roads and endless requisitions. Others say the army always operated on a threadbare edge, grand in ambition, threadbare in souls. Here's what you know. You've seen more men than you can count, hobbling like geese, their boots slashed open at the seams, their feet wrapped in strips of shirt, bits of saddle blanket, or, if truly desperate, pages torn from prayer books. One man you pass has tied hay around his calves like a scarecrow going through something. The blisters are not polite. They start small, a rub here, a pinch there, but they bloom. Oh, how they bloom. Pockets of rebellion that squish with every step, whispering "go home" with each soggy slap. You lance them if you can, but the water's never clean, and every needle seems to carry its own opinions about infection. But it's not just blisters. The damp air, the long marches, the lack of dry socks, it all leads to Trenchfoot's charming ancestor, a condition soldiers describe simply as rotting from the toes up. The skin cracks, the nails blacken. You stop feeling parts of your feet, which is somehow worse than the pain, and the boots. Oh, the boots. Napoleon's standard-issue infantry boots are serviceable for parade grounds and brief engagements, but not built for hundreds of kilometers of mud, snow, ice, and ghost towns. They're stiff, unlined, and about as forgiving as a court-martial. You soften them with animal fat if you can get it. Some men soak them in vinegar. One man tried sleeping with them under his head for warmth. He woke up with lice in both ears and a new respect for wool. There are rumors that Russian soldiers use felt boots, valenki they're called, made for true cold, thick as fireplace logs. But you haven't seen any yet. Only endless terrain and your own fading sense of direction. You learn tricks. Double up your socks with strips of shirt. Stuff dry grass inside the boot for insulation. Sleep with your feet near the fire if you can afford to sleep. One officer tells his men to take off their boots during every rest to dry them out. Most do. One doesn't. He wakes to find they've frozen solid. He marches the next day with open sandals made from his saddlebag. Sometimes, in your slower, sleepier hours, you wonder how such a grand army came undone at the toes. It's not battle wounds that send men home. It's feet, cracked, broken, bleeding feet that no doctor bothers with. Infirmaries are crowded with men who simply cannot walk anymore. They're loaded onto carts, if carts are available. If not, they stay behind, and then comes the frost. It starts at night, a breeze colder than expected, dew that turns to ice. You wake and can't feel your toes. At first, you wiggle them back to life. Then, you can't. A creeping numbness that feels like sleep, but wrong, deep, dangerous. A fellow soldier, a Polish lancer, shows you his foot one night. It's pale blue and smells like spoiled butter. "Still there," he says with a shrug, "but I think it's making plans to leave." The doctors can do little. There's no time, no tools, and no real understanding of frostbite beyond if it turns black. It's not yours anymore. They wrap, they pray, they cut sometimes. All 3 dot, and yet you march, because stopping means freezing. Stopping means being left behind, and no one waits. There's one soldier who claims he once walked 10 kilometers with no socks and nails sticking through the soles of his boots. You believe him. Everyone has stories now, quiet little epics of pain and resilience told over embers and bread crusts. One night, your boots sink. Each step feels like lifting a stone, but you keep going. Left, right, slosh, squish, squelch. The sound becomes a rhythm, a grim lullaby of wet leather and worn resolve. And the map looks beautiful, elegant strokes of ink, delicate symbols for roads and rivers, dotted lines where bridges should be. Everything is so orderly on parchment. You almost forget that those neat black lines represent hundreds of kilometers of chaotic, rutted, and often imaginary roads. Napoleon's plans, and he had many, depend on this map, on the idea that the Grande Armée can move like clockwork, its corps marching in harmony, supply lines trailing behind like a neat ribbon of flour, meat, and ammunition. It's a brilliant vision, except the roads don't behave, and neither does the mud. Historians still debate whether the supply lines failed because of sheer distance, poor planning, or the stubborn unfriendliness of Eastern Europe's geography. What's not debated is this: the army was not fed. You start to feel it as annoying in your belly. It's quiet at first, easy to ignore when the march begins. But by afternoon, when your canteen is light and the sun burns through your shirt, it turns into a roaring emptiness that no crust of hard bread can satisfy, if you're lucky. You receive your daily ration, a few 100 grams of bread, sometimes meat that's seen better decades, maybe a splash of vinegar or wine. But most days, nothing arrives. The wagons are behind, stuck in a bog, overturned, or simply missing. Horses die. Carts break. Roads vanish into marsh, and when the supplies do arrive, they're often spoiled. Barrels of salted meat that smell like low tide, biscuits crawling with weevils, a crate of rice that somehow absorbed most of the Dnieper River before being unpacked. You try not to complain. Everyone's hungry. You see the officers dipping into their private stores, fine cheese, wine, even sweets from Paris. They eat quickly, under their coats, away from the enlisted men. You don't blame them. Hunger makes people notice things. Hunger makes people bitter. There's a drummer boy in your unit who traded his drumsticks for a boiled potato. A cavalryman sold a silver buckle for 2 onions. Someone offered up a small volume of Voltaire's essays in exchange for a half-loaf of rye. The trade was accepted. Then the bread turned out to be made of sawdust and disappointment. There's a particular type of silence that descends when an army goes hungry, not dramatic, not desperate, just dull, sleepy, like the body has decided to pause emotion until calories arrive. The cavalry suffers most. Horses need far more food than men, and they're not exactly adaptable. You can't feed them tree bark or boot leather. They collapse in the fields, ribs like piano keys, eyes hollow. You see a line of 6 horses, all dead, their harnesses still attached. The wagon they were pulling is tipped sideways, contents spilled into the mud, mostly flour now soaked into something that looks like porridge and smells like failure. Eventually, the horses are eaten quietly, without ceremony. You hear about it first in whispers. A unit down the road, someone found meat, then another group with oddly shaped cuts roasting over the fire. You stop asking. Later, you help carry a makeshift stretcher past a man who looks at your boots too long. You grip them a little tighter that night. Napoleon, of course, is aware. His couriers bring him updates, and he issues new orders: forage from nearby villages, distribute remaining stores more efficiently, accelerate the supply wagons. But there's a problem. There are no villages. Russia has begun to burn itself as the French army advances. The Russian defenders retreat, leaving behind only smoke and ashes. Fields are razed, wells poisoned, barns stripped bare. Villagers vanish into the woods. What's left is a scorched silence, and in it you scavenge what you can: turnips, wild herbs, mushrooms that may or may not have opinions about digestion. A group of soldiers finds a hen somehow left behind. They argue over it for 30 minutes, then decide to boil the entire thing, feathers and all. The soup is crunchy. No one complains. One morning, you wake to find a man carefully peeling bark from a birch tree. He's slicing it into strips and chewing slowly, like jerky. Tastes like nothing, he says, but it's warm. Desperate men become creative. Some boil leather. Others mix flour with snow to stretch it further. A few try soaking biscuits in spirits to disguise the rot. It mostly works for one bite. There's no medicine for hunger, no prayers that fill the gut, just the slow erosion of energy. Your steps become shorter. Your pack feels heavier. You stop singing. You stop talking. And still, you march. Napoleon still rides near the front. You see him sometimes, wrapped in his gray coat, staring into the distance. He rarely speaks. When he does, it's crisp, measured. Press forward, he says. There is food in Moscow, is there? Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly believed Moscow would be a prized city, full of supplies, warmth, and leverage, or if he simply needed a finish line for this slow disaster. You don't know. You only know that today you ate half a biscuit and a thimble of rainwater, and tomorrow is still a question mark, scribbled across a road that keeps vanishing beneath your feet. There's an old military saying: no plan survives contact with the enemy. But what if the enemy refuses to show up? You're in Poland, or what used to be Poland. The lines on the maps keep shifting, much like the roads beneath your boots. It's June now, and you've been marching for weeks, following orders that feel increasingly vague and delayed. You've not seen a Russian soldier, not even a distant flag on the horizon, just empty fields, abandoned cottages, and the occasional curious goat and mud. So much mud. Welcome to the waiting period, the strange lull before the real disaster begins. It's not dramatic. There's no clash of sabers, no cannon fire echoing through pine forests, just a steady drip of rain, a slow boil of confusion, and the strange realization that you're now part of an army that has outrun its own sense of purpose. The weather, ever contrary, has shifted. The June rains roll in like uninvited relatives and refuse to leave. The roads dissolve. The rivers swell. Wagons sink like cakes left out in the rain. The air smells of mildew and wet wool, and you've begun rating each puddle by depth and personality. One day, a man disappears into a ditch that looked like solid ground. He reappears 2 hours later, grumpier and several pounds muddier. No one asks questions. Historians still argue whether Napoleon intended to delay his crossing into Russian territory, or if the rain and confusion simply forced his hand. The official line says it was strategic. He wanted to allow his extended forces to catch up, regroup, align their movements. But to you, standing ankle-deep in what might be a former road, it doesn't feel like strategy. It feels like drift. Morale begins to waver, not collapse yet, but waver. Soldiers start grumbling more openly. Where are the Russians? Someone asks. Do they even exist? Jokes another. A third man wonders aloud whether this entire campaign is just a long march toward a very cold metaphor. In camp, things grow tense. Food is already scarce. Fires are difficult to light in the rain. Uniforms never dry. And that constant wetness on your skin, in your boots, behind your knees, starts to feel personal. You learn to live with dampness, to embrace it. You stop trying to keep your socks dry, and instead rotate which part of them touches your skin. You keep your hat slightly askew to drain rain off one side. A corporal ties garlic around his neck, claiming it keeps the swamp out of the lungs. He still coughs. The Polish countryside, beautiful in theory, is a logistical nightmare in practice. Fields stretch for miles, but provide little shelter. Forests offer cover, but are home to swarms of insects that seem to have unionized against the French. A particularly aggressive mosquito bites through your glove. You stare at it. Impressed, you sleep wherever you can. In barns, under carts, sometimes upright, leaning against a tree. One night, your friend Antoine wakes up screaming because a frog has made a home in his boot. The frog does not apologize, and all the while, the army stretches farther. The lines grow thinner. Some corps lag behind by days. Orders are delayed. Messages get muddied, misunderstood. You hear of a regiment that marched in a circle for 2 days because no one told the captain the road had changed. The officers grow quieter, more serious. Maps are consulted with increasing desperation. The Russians remain just out of reach, always retreating, always one ruined bridge ahead. Their plan is brilliant in its simplicity. Never stop, never fight, and never leave anything useful behind. Napoleon is aware. Of course he's aware. He rides ahead of most, often flanked by a small entourage of generals, scribes, and aides. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's with that same clipped certainty. We will catch them soon. His voice carries conviction, enough to keep men moving. But even he cannot stop the weather. The Niemen River, the unofficial border between Notrisha and Russia proper, swells with rainwater. It's wide, slow, and sullen. Bridges are built, rebuilt, reinforced. The army waits and waits and waits. While you wait, you begin to notice how strange the silence is. In past campaigns, there was always noise, skirmishes, drums, church bells, screams something. Here, just wind through reeds, rain on canvas, the occasional coughing fit. It feels like marching into a story that hasn't been written yet. You hear rumors, always rumors, that the Russians are preparing a great stand somewhere beyond the river, that they're gathering every cannon, every soldier, every Cossack. But you also hear other things, that the Tsar is nowhere near the front, that the generals are divided, that even Russian peasants are fleeing the army's path. One soldier starts keeping a list of things. You've marched past 47 abandoned villages, 12 dead cows, 3 usable spoons, 1 very aggressive goosey, calls it his campaign journal. It's more popular than the official communiques. Meanwhile, your boots are slowly fusing with your feet. Your rifle feels heavier each day. The marching songs have lost most of their melody, and you've begun dreaming of dry socks the way others dream of home. And yet, when the order finally comes to cross the Niemen, there's a surge of energy, a feeling that something is finally happening. You line up, you wait your turn. You watch men wade across the water, shoulders high, coats bunched around their necks. The river is cold, the river is wide, and on the far side, Russia waits, patient, vast, and absolutely not ready to explain itself. You step into Russia, not with a fanfare, but with a squelch. The Niemen River lies behind you now, slowly curling westward, like it's trying to pull you back. But the army moves forward, boots soaked, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning an empty horizon. You're in enemy territory. You expect resistance, cannons, ambushes, at the very least, an angry farmer shaking a rake. But there's nothing, no troops, no civilians, just vast, wind-brushed silence. You look around. The land is flat and oddly still, dotted with pale trees and long fields of grass that ripple like fabric. Here and there you see the faint outline of a road, but it dissolves under your feet as you follow it. The villages you pass through are hollowed out, doors hang open, ash lies thick on cold hearths. Someone left a wooden spoon still sitting in a bowl. The Russians have vanished. Historians still debate whether the Russian army's retreat was a calculated masterstroke or a desperate necessity. Some say it was intentional, a scorched earth policy designed to lure Napoleon deeper and deeper into a country that didn't want him, couldn't feed him, and would gladly freeze him. Others argue the retreat was reactive, a series of decisions made out of disorganization and fear. You don't know which it is. You only know that every day you walk farther into a place that refuses to meet your gaze. The sense of unease grows. You're used to war being noisy, not just gunfire, but the sound of occupation, barking orders, haggling, chaos. But here, there's only the quiet shuffle of your own men, the creak of wheels, the occasional command, shouted just to remind everyone that authority still exists. A plume of smoke appears one morning, curling up over the horizon like a beckoning finger. The army quickens its pace, thinking perhaps a town has been spared. But when you arrive, you find charred wood, broken barrels, and a single dog standing in the street, its ribs visible beneath its fur. Even the church is gone. Just a blackened cross melted into the ash. You're not scared yet, not really. But the edges of your thoughts are fraying, because you realize you don't know what day it is anymore. You don't know how far you've marched. You don't know when the last time was you saw a living civilian, and the mosquitoes still here, somehow thriving in the ash and ruin, biting through wool, dancing in your ears. Feasting like this is their golden age. One soldier ties horsehair around his wrists as a makeshift repellent. Another suggests that swearing loudly confuses them. It doesn't. You've learned not to rely on maps. They lie. One morning, you pass a milestone carved in stone. It says Moscow to 1,065 kilometers. You stop and stare. It doesn't seem real. The number is both impossibly large and alarmingly close. Moscow, the great city, the glittering goal. It's all anyone talks about now. Once we get to Moscow, they say, we'll rest, there'll be food, they'll surrender. It becomes a mantra, half prayer, half bedtime story. And yet, Moscow isn't moving any closer. The roads meander. The heat persists. Your shoulders ache from the pack. Your legs feel like they've been replaced with damp logs. And still, no Russians. Not entirely, though. You see them at a distance sometimes. A plume of cavalry on a hill. A patrol that vanishes into a copse of trees. Once, you catch the glint of a bayonet behind a fence. But they don't attack. They don't challenge. They watch. It's like being followed by ghosts. You begin to suspect that Russia is less a place and more a presence. A vast, breathing thing that allows you in, not because you're strong, but because it knows it doesn't need to stop you. It will wait. It will thin your numbers. It will wear down your boots, your strength, your patience. A small skirmish breaks out near a supply convoy. One day, a few shots, a couple of shouts, and it's over. You arrive too late to see anything but the aftermath. 2 wounded men and a burned wagon. No sign of the attackers. The general shrugs. Cossacks, he says, like fleas. But you don't. Laugh. Because that night, a soldier in your camp screams, a deep, guttural sound that cuts through the trees like a blade. When you find him, he's staring at a shredded saddlebag. They took everything, he says. I was awake. They still took it. No one saw them. No one heard them. The army begins to tighten its circle at night. Fires are fewer. Guards are posted in pairs. You sleep lighter. You dream stranger, and still no battles. It begins to dawn on you that this is the battle. The distance, the silence, the emptiness. Russia is not going to meet you on your terms. It's going to stretch you, test your resolve, wear down the cogs of this grand machine until it grinds to a halt from within. You remember Napoleon's promise, we will find them, we will fight, but now you're not sure that was ever part of the plan. Maybe the Russians don't want to fight. Maybe they want you to keep walking right past your limits until there's nothing left to carry a musket. You trudge on past another blackened village, past another empty well, past another signpost etched in Cyrillic that might as well say, you don't belong here. Russia is still ahead, but you're beginning to suspect it's not a place you can ever truly reach. The buzzing comes before the dawn, not the gentle kind, like bees in a flower bed, or the purr of a friendly fly. This is heavier, a droning cloud of mosquitoes, thick enough to have opinions about your life choices. You swat at them in your sleep. Your jacket collar pulled up as far as it will go. Your shako perched over your face like a sad umbrella. It doesn't help. They find the gaps. They always find the gaps. You wake up scratching your arms and chewing bread so hard it sounds like gravel in your mouth. There's no butter, of course, just the comforting crunch of overbaked flour, age, and maybe a bit of ash from last night's fire. Breakfast of champions. You're not alone in your misery. Everyone's scratching. Everyone's twitching. Someone's muttering threats against the Mosquito King, which may or may not be a joke. One man claims the insects here can bite through leather. Another swears he saw them carry away a spoon. But it's not just the bugs, it's the emptiness. You've been marching for days through a land that refuses to meet your gaze. You pass houses with doors ajar, chickens missing, No sign of life, except the occasional creaking shutter. The forests are dense, watching. The wind carries smells you don't recognize. Smoke, rot, damp bark, something sweet and decaying at once. The Russians are still retreating, burning what they can't take. You see evidence in the charred beams of barns, fields trampled down to mud, livestock slaughtered and left. It's not war in the traditional sense, it's subtraction. Every day there's less. Historians still argue whether this scorched earth strategy was entirely premeditated. Some insist it was a calculated move by Russian command, sacrificing land to drain Napoleon's strength. Others argue it was chaos, generals acting independently, villages reacting in desperation. You don't know the debate. You only know you're hungry and tired, and now itchy. You try to forage a few wild onions, a patch of mushrooms that no one can identify, but you eat anyway. Some soldiers boil roots into soup, others catch frogs. There's even a rumor of a man roasting a rat on a bayonet, seasoned with gunpowder for spice. You don't ask for the recipe. Water is easier to find, but harder to trust. The rivers are slow, tinged with sediment. You filter it through cloth, then boil it, or pretend you did. Some of the men are too thirsty to wait. Stomachs begin to turn. Cramps, fevers, murmurs in the night. You stop keeping track of who's falling behind. The line is too long, too thin, and too quiet. There's one moment that sticks with you. A clearing in the forest, a breeze that almost feels cool, and ahead, a house that hasn't been burned. You approach cautiously, musket low. The door creaks open. Inside, a table still set for dinner. A loaf of bread hardened to stone. A chair tipped back, as if someone left in haste. On the wall, a child's drawing, stick figures, a horse, a sun with an uncertain smile. You stare at it longer than you should. Outside, someone finds a potato. It becomes a celebration. The potato is boiled, divided, shared. A general walks past and doesn't stop the feast. He looks like he hasn't eaten either. That night, the mosquitoes return. They're worse in the marshes. You wrap your scarf over your face. One soldier lights a fire too close to his tent and singes off his eyebrows. He says it was worth it. The army's rhythm becomes disjointed. Corps fall behind. Horses go lame. Messages arrive late or not at all. Napoleon pushes forward, always forward, but even he must notice the drag, the gaps, the growing sense that he's being stretched, not advancing. He rides ahead, coat flapping, boots muddy, still impeccably composed. You see him sometimes, staring at the horizon, like he's willing the Russians to appear, or perhaps disappear completely. It's hard to say. The weather doesn't help. Days are hot, the sun oppressive, the air thick and slow. Then, without warning, a storm, sheets of rain so sudden you'd think the sky broke open. Roads vanish, tents collapse. A wagon overturns into a ditch. You help lift it out with 6 other men, soaked to the bone, laughing at the absurdity. What's next? Someone asks. Fire ants, snow in July. No one answers, because this isn't a campaign anymore. It's a pilgrimage through decay. You begin to see strange things. A chair balanced on a stump, like someone left in the middle of a meal. A trail of shoes, one by one, leading into a creek. A dead tree filled with tiny carved faces, dozens of them, all frowning. You don't know if it's superstition or art or something older. You don't ask. The men stop singing. Even the officers stop trying to keep spirits up. The drums are quieter now. Some don't beat at all. One drummer tossed his sticks into a ravine and said, "If we need rhythm, we'll listen to the coughing." Still, you march, because what else is there? Your boots stick with every step. Your coat clings to your arms. Your pack feels like a lead weight filled with regrets. But the road continues, curling into forests, through glades, past stone markers that tell you you're closer to Moscow, even if you're not sure Moscow is real anymore. And then, at dusk, you hear it. Not battle, not retreat, just music. A lone violin played by a soldier with a cracked instrument and fewer teeth than he started with. The tune is simple, sad, beautiful, in a way that makes the bugs pause and the firelight feel softer. You don't speak, you just listen. And for a moment, in this endless, empty country that refuses to embrace or repel, you feel something close to peace. You expected snow, or at least frost, maybe a breath of winter that would sting your face and give the story some proper drama. But instead, you're sunburned. Welcome to the part of the campaign no one ever talks about, the heat wave before the freeze. The summer of 1812 in Western Russia decided to do its best Mediterranean impression: hot, dry, dusty, and oddly judgmental. By midday, your uniform sticks to you like wet paper. The wool itches. Your collar is damp. Your shako feels like a stovepipe on your head. You begin to wonder if you're being cooked slowly, like a boiled onion. The sun beats down, the air grows still, and your canteen grows suspiciously light. It turns out Napoleon's army, famed for its precision and engineering, had not adequately planned for this part. Historians still argue whether the scorching heat was an anomaly or just a regular Russian summer served extra dry. Either way, the Grande Armée was ready for mud, frost, and endless snowdrifts, but not this. The roads turn into trails of fine dust, kicked up by tens of thousands of feet, wheels, and hooves. It gets in your eyes, in your mouth, in your food. There's dust in your coat, dust in your pack, dust between your socks and your blisters. At some point, you start chewing the air. Wagons fall behind. Horses collapse in the heat. Some try to drink from roadside puddles, stagnant, warm, and buzzing with insect life. The smarter animals refuse. The dumber ones don't survive. And the water, well, you find it occasionally in slow-moving creeks and shallow wells. But it's warm, tinged with algae, and shared with a disturbing number of frogs. Boiling, it takes time and firewood, both of which are in short supply. Some men drink straight from the source. Others get sick. A few just lie down under a tree and stop arguing. You begin to ration water like gold. One soldier claims he's learned to survive on 3 spoonfuls a day. Another brags that he can identify clean water by smell alone. The rest of you just hope the next village, if there even is one, has a working bucket. The army's pace slows. You begin marching at dawn, when the light is soft and your boots haven't reached full boil. By midday, the line stretches thin, like melting candle wax across the countryside. Men walk with their jackets open, their faces red and shining. Officers stop enforcing dress codes. Even Napoleon loosens a button. You sweat so much that your shirt dries stiff with salt. The inside of your collar forms a ring that crunches when you move. Your skin burns in patches, bright red where your uniform gapped, pale and clammy where it stayed. You start to resemble a half-finished pastry. Still, you march, because you're supposed to, because someone says Moscow is close, because turning back isn't an option. There's a quiet desperation growing now. Less discipline, more silence. The road ahead shimmers with heat. The men around you are thinner than they were a month ago. The food is gone. The songs are gone. The jokes are mostly muttered one evening. You find shade beneath a broken cart and share a piece of dried apple with another soldier. He says it came from home. You chew slowly. It tastes like memory. By now, hunger has changed you. You start noticing strange things. How green wood smells when it burns. The way beetles crunch underfoot. The color of moss that grows on north-facing trees. Your senses are sharper, more desperate. You're not starving, not yet, but your body is whispering that the edge is closer than you think. Someone tries to trap a rabbit with a belt. It works. Barely insects fill the evenings. Not just mosquitoes now, but horseflies, midges, strange, buzzing things that seem to emerge from the earth itself. You sleep wrapped in a scarf, breathing through a corner just to keep your face covered. Your dreams are strange and sticky. Napoleon keeps moving. You don't see him as often now, but word trickles through. He's angry. The Russians won't fight. The weather is ridiculous. Supplies are behind. Generals bicker. His dispatches are growing more urgent, more clipped. Still, he believes the next battle will end it. But battles are hard to fight. When the enemy keeps not being where you expect them, there are skirmishes, little clashes, a few shots exchanged in forests or on riverbanks. Cossacks harass the rear, stealing supplies, scattering the foragers. They seem to know the land, like it's whispering to them. You start to wonder if Russia itself is helping. Them tucking them behind trees, guiding their horses along hidden paths, and always the heat. It makes you irritable, short-tempered. You snap at others. You snap at yourself. The idea of dying from heat exhaustion starts to sound more likely than dying in battle. You wonder what Moscow smells like. You hope it has a breeze. At one camp, someone finds a stream deep in a gully. A dozen men descend. Like wolves, they strip off their coats, plunge their heads under. The water is cold, pure, perfect. For 5 minutes, it feels like heaven. Then the smell hits, upstream. A horse carcass lies bloated and bobbing gently. No one speaks. They just get out, dry off, and say nothing to the next group heading that way. And still, the army moves forward through sun, dust, thirst, and the weight of their own choices. You can't remember the last time you passed a field with crops or a village that had people. You're marching through a land that's forgotten how to be inhabited, and all the while, Moscow sits ahead like a mirage, like a rumor, like a promise made by someone who didn't have to walk here. You roll your shoulders, shift the weight of your pack, shake the bugs from your sleeves, and walk on, because that's all there is left. The word of the day is nothing. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink, nothing to steal, borrow, or even sniff, hopefully. The army has officially entered the hunger phase, and you, lucky you, are right in the thick of it. It begins slowly. Your Not starving, not yet. But food becomes a mythical concept, something men whisper about, like buried treasure or warm socks. You remember meals the way you remember childhood dreams. That stew in Vienna, the bread in Bavaria, a roast duck. That may or may not have been imaginary. You're chewing bark. Yes. Actual bark. A sergeant taught you to peel the soft underlayer from birch trees, soak it, then roast it over a fire. Tastes like sadness, he says, but it's warm. That counts for something. Foraging, once a supplemental tactic, is now a full-time profession. You watch grown men argue over mushrooms with the passion of poets. Someone finds a sack of barley in a barn, half moldy, mouse-nibbled, and immediately worth more than gold. It's shared, kind of, boiled into a sludge, eaten with reverence. And then there's the horse meat. It starts with the wounded ones, the lame, the fallen. At first, it's the officers who authorize it, grim nods, reluctant acceptance. Then it becomes normal. Horses die. The meat is carved. Fires are lit. You try not to look your mount in the eye anymore. You've heard the jokes, of course. Napoleon's cavalry, now more digestible than ever. They're not funny, but you laugh anyway, because the alternative is crying into your soup. Historians still argue whether the supply breakdown was inevitable, or if better planning could have saved the army's stomach. Some blame Russian scorched earth tactics. Others blame poor roads, bad maps, and a little too much confidence. All of them agree, however, that by this point in the campaign, the Grande Armée was eating itself. You're lucky if your unit receives any official rations. Usually, it's a crust of black bread, hard as rock, and older than Napoleon's ambition. One day, a courier delivers what he claims is salted pork. It smells like socks and looks like regret. You eat it anyway. Water is no easier. Wells are often dry. Streams are suspicious. More than once, you've watched men drink from puddles, only to stumble away with stomachs rebelling like mutinous sailors. Diarrhea becomes an unofficial mascot of the campaign. You learn to boil everything. If it can be lit on fire and held over a pot, it's considered food adjacent. You've tried roots, moss, bits of leather. One man attempted to eat the lining of his hat. He says it tasted like rank ambition. Salt is a luxury, seasoning, a memory. Meals become exercises in survival, not satisfaction. You eat to keep moving, to keep your legs from collapsing, to stop the spinning behind your eyes. And somehow, Napoleon still expects momentum. The orders keep coming. Advance, advance, advance. Moscow is close. The Tsar is breaking. Just a little further. You wonder if he's eating better. Rumor has it he still receives wine, perhaps a roast, maybe the occasional fruit. You try not to resent him, but when your dinner consists of a spoonful of boiled shoe, you start to reconsider your loyalties. The men around you are changing. Faces hollow, eyes sunken, cheeks speckled with soot, mosquito bites, and the kind of despair that never quite gets spoken aloud. Some don't march anymore. They stumble. Others lag behind. A few vanish, slipped into the forest, hoping to forage or escape or disappear into myth. You see signs of Russian resistance, but never enough to engage. Skirmish lines flicker at the edge of the trees. Tracks lead into shadows. You find burned wagons, empty homes, cow carcasses left to bloat in fields. Everything screams, We don't want you here, but you're still here. And now, the hunger plays tricks. You see shapes in the trees. You smell bread that isn't baking. One man swears he saw his mother sitting under a pine tree, knitting socks. He walked off the road to greet her. He hasn't returned. Sleep becomes fragmented. You lie on the hard ground, dreaming of taverns, of cheese, of butter melting on warm loaves. Then you wake to cold air, stiff limbs, and the distant sound of someone trying to chew raw oats. And still, you march, because the alternative is dying where you are. And if Moscow is only weeks away, if the Tsar will surely surrender, if food waits beyond the next ridge, well, it's worth the step. There's a moment, one morning, that stays with you. The mist is low, curling around the trees. Your unit is quiet, too tired to complain. Ahead, the road crests a hill. At the top, a half-burned signpost written in Cyrillic. You can't read it, but if you could describe Russia's hospitality policy in one phrase, it would be, please enjoy this fire. It's all we left. The villages, already sparse, are now completely gone, burned, flattened, erased. You march into the remnants of one's places, and it's like walking through someone else's nightmare. Roof beams stick out of the ground like splintered ribs. Walls stand half-fallen, charred black, still warm to the touch, even days after the fire. The smell, a thick, bitter blend of ash, soot, and boiled wood, clings to everything. It's in your hair, your jacket, even your dreams. Welcome to the full embrace of the scorched earth strategy. The Russian army, ever elusive, has been burning its own country as it retreats. Fields, granaries, wells, tools, all destroyed. If they can't take it with them, they light it on fire. If they can't carry the food, they poison it or scatter it for the crows. And the crows, by the way, are doing just fine. Historians still argue whether this policy was ordered from the top, Tsar Alexander himself, or if it evolved from panic and desperation at the local level. Some claim it was part of a larger strategy to grind Napoleon's advance into starvation. Others suggest that angry peasants, faced with the prospect of foreign troops in their homes, decided to torch everything rather than surrender it. Regardless of its origin, it's working. You've never been in a country so intent on disappearing itself. At first, it's shocking. You reach a new village, hopeful. Maybe this one was spared. But no, every time, it's the same. Blackened earth, twisted metal, a smell of loss. You stop hoping. Eventually, you stop even looking up. Your eyes fix on the road ahead, or the boots of the man in front of you. Anything to avoid the sight of another hollowed-out ruin. You've grown used to the quiet, but this is different. This is silence with teeth. The villagers are long gone, or hiding in the trees, or buried beneath the ruins. You don't know. Occasionally, you spot footprints, small ones, children maybe, in the mud near a creek, or hear a distant rustle. In the forest, that could be deer, or could be the ones who refuse to run further. One night, a soldier swears he saw a woman watching from a ridge, hair loose, eyes glowing like coals. You joke that it's the spirit of Russia itself. No one laughs in camp. The talk grows grim. Someone suggests we should start burning things ourselves, preemptively, to deny the Cossacks anything useful. Another replies, what's left? A third man, clearly slipping into hunger-fueled philosophy, says, we are the fire now. You don't argue. You're too tired. The landscape begins to reflect your internal state, gray, cracked, hollow. Forests that once seemed lush are now stripped of anything useful. Trees stand like witnesses, unwilling to help. Rivers wind silently, more obstacles than resources. Even the birds have grown quiet. And still, Napoleon pushes forward. You hear he's furious, that the lack of resistance is an insult, that he expected battles, parades, terms of surrender. Instead, he's received dust, disease, and the eerie feeling of being lured. He rides faster now, sends scouts further ahead, issues more orders, though it's unclear who still has the strength to follow them. His marshals argue devout, Marat, nay, all brilliant, all fraying at the seams. They're men of action, not wandering, and this feels like wandering. There's a new kind of whisper now, not of mutiny, not quite, but of unease. Because if the Russians won't fight, and they won't feed you, and they won't surrender, what exactly is the point of any of this? One afternoon, your unit finds a single goat, a miracle. It's tied to a stake behind a half-burned barn, bleeding like it owns the world. You're not sure if it was left behind or wandered in from somewhere. Either way, it's immediately surrounded by a crowd of men who look like they haven't smiled in a week. The goat is named Napoleon, too. Someone makes a paper crown for it. That night, the army dines on roast meat. For 10 blessed minutes, it feels like things might be turning around. Then the rain returns. Not a storm, just steady, unapologetic drizzle. The kind that soaks your bones slowly, methodically. Tents sag, fires hiss. You curl under your coat and try to imagine dry sheets, or just the smell of something that isn't damp wool. The next morning, the goat is gone. No one knows who took it, or maybe they do, and they're just not saying. Either way, the brief joy evaporates. You march on, and Russia continues to fold in on itself, like a house disappearing room by room, always one step ahead of you. You don't hate the enemy anymore. You just want to find them. You've heard of battle. You've prepared for it, trained for it, marched hundreds of miles toward it. You imagined clashing sabers, roaring cannons, galloping horses, dust and glory and orders shouted through the smoke. Instead, you get Borodino, not a battle in the heroic sense, more like a blunt object hurled through history. One day, it's just another stop on your endless march east. The next, it's the bloodiest single day of the entire campaign, carved into your memory not with precision, but with noise, confusion, and the smell of burning earth. The army stirs early. There's something in the air. You feel it in the stiffness of the officers, in the way scouts return faster than usual, in the hush that settles over the men. You're told, this is it. The Russians are standing their ground. You're going to fight. Finally, there's a strange relief in that word, fight. It means the waiting is over, the endless walking, the silence, the vanishing villages. All of it has led here. And yet, as the army assembles, as battalions line up across the fields near the Kalaka River, you begin to wish for more walking. The Russian positions are dug in earthworks, redoubts, artillery, and finally men uniformed, serious, thousands of them. This isn't a rear guard. This is the Russian First Army, ready to make a stand. Historians still argue whether Borodino was a tactical victory for Napoleon or a strategic one for the Russians. He took the ground. They retreated, but at what cost? Over 70,000 combined casualties in one day, most of them in a confused, grinding slaughter with no clear gains. You don't know the numbers yet. All you know is that everything is loud cannon. Fire rips through the morning haze like thunder at ground level. Muskets crack in staccato rhythms. Drums beat furiously. Orders are shouted, lost, repeated, ignored. Horses scream. Men scream. You scream. Your regiment is ordered to flank a battery. You charge up a slope into smoke over scattered bodies. You're not sure if you hit anyone. You're not sure if you were hit. At one point, you lose your footing and tumble behind a fallen tree, only to find another soldier already there, breathing shallow, eyes wide. He looks at you and whispers, "Is this it?" You don't answer. There are moments of pure chaos. A cannonball lands 3 feet to your left, flinging mud and something heavier. You wipe your face and keep going. You fire your musket until it jams. Then you switch to your bayonet. Then your hands dot. By midday, the field is a haze of smoke and noise. Trees are shredded. Earthworks have changed hands multiple times. The redoubts, small forts guarding the Russian center, become pits of mud and death. Each foot gained measured in bodies. Napoleon stays back. He commands from a distance, reluctant to commit the Imperial Guard. Some say he's ill. Others say cautious. You don't see him. You don't see anyone above your pay grade, actually. Just the man next to you, bleeding from the ear, still marching. You pause briefly behind a wall. Someone hands you a crust of bread. It's damp, and you don't ask what with. You eat it, then a charge. You run again. You scream, not from rage, but to drown out the world. The smoke is so thick you barely see the man in front of you. You trip over a fallen body and land in the mud, sinking into something soft. You tell yourself it's just a coat. Eventually, the firing slows. The sun begins to dip. The Russians fall back, not in a rout, but like a wave, pulling slowly away from shore. You hold the ground. Technically, you've won, but no one is cheering. The battlefield is a still life of exhaustion. Bodies everywhere. Many not dead, just too tired or wounded to move. Smoke curls over broken cannons, blood-soaked soil, and shattered wagons. You sit down, finally, and realize your hands won't stop shaking. The man next to you, you don't know his name, mutters, "We did it." Then he laughs, once bitterly, and closes his eyes. That night, the wounded moan softly across the fields. You lie down without tent or blanket, muscles twitching, ears ringing. Someone nearby is singing. It's not a happy song. You don't sleep, not really. You drift. You wake up to the smell of burned uniforms and horses. You pick up your pack and start moving again. Moscow, they say, is only a few days away. The Russians are falling back. Victory is close. You don't feel victorious. You feel like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. BORODINO is over. And yet it lingers, not as glory, but as a weight, a memory too heavy to carry and too vivid to set down. The road to Moscow begins, not with a bang, but with the smell of smoke, familiar by now. But this time, different, thicker, greasier. It sticks in your throat before you see anything. And when you crest the final rise, boots dragging, eyes half shut, with exhaustion, you finally glimpse it. The city of Moscow, low and wide, sprawled across the land like something out of a half-forgotten fairy tale. Only the fairy tale is on fire. You expected golden domes. You expected bells and boulevards. Maybe the sound of surrender, or at least a parade. You imagined flags lowered, keys presented, bread passed around. The people of Moscow offering cautious respect to the conquerors of Europe instead. You get flames licking the skyline. You blink. Are you dreaming? No, this is real. Napoleon reaches a hill overlooking the city, his staff clustered around him, the wind pulling at their coats. He stares for a long time, says nothing. You don't know what he's thinking. Historians still debate whether the fire was started by Russian arsonists, agents left behind to burn their own capital, or by accident, or even by looting French troops. Some say it was planned well in advance, a brutal final act of defiance. Others say it was chaos unleashed, a consequence of too many frightened hands and too much dry timber. What matters to you is that Moscow is burning, and no one is putting it out. The Grande Army enters the city cautiously. No resistance, no ambush, but also no people. The streets are deserted. Doors hang open. Windows stare like hollow eyes. You pass grand homes, palaces even, and find them empty, sometimes eerily tidy, sometimes stripped bare, sometimes smeared with soot and panic. There are rats. Of course there are rats, but no defenders, no delegates, no peace. Napoleon takes up residence in the Kremlin, a glittering prize, symbolic, impressive, but it might as well be a throne built on kindling, because the fires keep spreading. Every night, new blazes bloom across the city. The wind turns erratic, hungry. Whole districts go up at once, flames jumping rooftops, curling into the sky like accusations. The soldiers try to put them out, some of them, but there's no water, no coordination, no leadership in the chaos. You stand in a courtyard as sparks drift past your head like angry stars. In the distance, onion domes are silhouetted against the glow. It would be beautiful if it weren't so catastrophic, and the silence, still there, except now it has teeth. You begin to understand. This is not a conquest. This is a warning. Whatever Moscow was supposed to be a prize, a peace offering, a bargaining chip, it's now a trap, a golden lure, burned black before you can even taste it. There is no welcome, no food, no comfort. The few civilians who remain look at you with flat eyes. They don't beg, they don't plead. They just move past you like shadows, surviving. One old man stands in a square, feeding pigeons. You pass him 3 days in a row. He never speaks in a bakery. You find flour just enough for a handful of men to bake something flat and edible. You eat it slowly, eyes closed. It tastes like everything you left behind. The soldiers settle into the city's bones, not joyfully, not triumphantly, just ... settle. Tents appear. Orders are given. Looting starts, then stops, then starts again. Some men get drunk, others wander. A few simply sit, unsure of what this victory even means anymore. You begin to hear the whispers. Why aren't they surrendering? Why won't the Tsar negotiate? Napoleon sends messengers. He waits. Days pass, then weeks. The fires finally burn themselves out. Mostly, the smell lingers. Ash settles like snow. Autumn creeps in. The nights grow colder. You thought Moscow would be a climax, the crescendo of the campaign. Instead, It's a strange, smoldering pause. A city emptied, not by conquest, but by intention. A symbol of resistance, not through strength, but absence. And now everyone waits, but winter doesn't. Moscow has gone still, not the peaceful still of a sleeping city, but the uneasy hush of a place holding its breath. The fires have died down, but the smoke still clings to the buildings, a ghostly veil over scorched domes and hollowed homes. You wander streets that should be humming with life, and the silence makes your boots feel too loud. And now you wait. Napoleon has won, but no one is surrendering. The Tsar does not write back. No emissaries arrive. No white flags flutter. It's as if Russia has retreated. The city sits like a stage with no actors. You start to understand the worst truth of all. You came here for nothing. Napoleon, still brilliant, still proud, paces the halls of the Kremlin. He dictates letters. He hosts dinners. He tries to project calm and power, but the edges of his control are fraying. His men whisper that he's waiting for something that will never arrive. Moscow is a trophy, but there's no ceremony to display it. The food situation, still bad. Whatever supplies existed in the city were either burned, looted, or hoarded by the few residents who didn't flee. The French tried to ration, tried to forage, but Moscow is not a farm. It's a palace. On a plateau of ash, the harvests are gone, the cellars are empty, and the longer you sit, the hungrier you get. Winter has not yet arrived, but she's knocking at first. It's a breeze, then a chill, then mornings with frost on your coat and puddles that crack underfoot. The fires become constant, small ones for warmth, larger ones for cooking, and endless, desperate ones for morale. Men huddle in courtyards, in ruined mansions, even in carriages converted into shelters. One man builds a chimney out of bricks stolen from a church. It works until it dessens. It totes another fashions a coat from stolen curtains. He looks like a dusty marquis. Everyone is jealous. You begin to feel the cold in your fingertips, in your teeth. You dream about soup, and still Napoleon waits. Historians still debate why he stayed in Moscow so long. Was he hoping for diplomacy, trying to project dominance, delaying retreat out of pride or indecision or sheer disbelief? Some argue he never planned to spend the winter. Others think he was trapped by his own myth. You just try to keep your socks dry. The soldiers grow restless. Some desert. Some start fights. Some simply stare into the fire, waiting for a word that never comes. Rumors begin to swirl like ash. The Tsar is raising a new army. The roads home are blocked. Cossacks are circling. You don't know what's true anymore. The city is haunted now, not by ghosts, but by expectation. Every day you think, surely we leave tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and you're still here, still hungry, still cold, still wondering why the most powerful army in Europe is sitting inside a ruin, hoping someone else will blink first. The looting grows worse. At first, it was luxury, tapestries, silverware, the occasional piano. Now, it's desperation. Scraps of wood, torn up books, burnt beans, anything to burn, anything to eat. You see a man spit roasting a boot sole. You see another chewing buttons. You don't judge. One morning, someone shoots a cat. You don't ask who. You just eat. The officers try to keep morale high. They order drills, cleanings, briefings, but discipline is slippery in frost. You start to see soldiers without boots. without belts, wearing mismatched uniforms. One man wears half a bearskin rug and insists it's the latest Paris fashion. Napoleon remains silent on the date of departure. And then, one evening, a shift, no announcement, just whispers, a tightening of routines. Officers looking distracted, maps coming out again, wagons being counted. The general mood becomes nervous, and you know we're leaving. But it's too late, because the sky is already heavy. The air smells sharp. Your breath clouds the moment it leaves your lips. The first snow falls like a warning, soft, slow, and impossibly quiet. You catch a flake on your glove. Watch it melt, and somewhere deep in your chest, a quiet truth settles. Moscow did not fall. We did. The retreat begins not with a trumpet, but with a crunch, a single step on frost-hardened ground, then another, then 1,000 boots, dragging and shuffling and stamping in a rhythm that says, less glory and more let's just survive. You leave Moscow in silence. There are no cheers, no farewells, no triumphant exit. Just the wind curling through blackened streets and snowflakes dusting the shoulders of uniforms now stiff with ash and regret. It's October, and the road home stretches, longer than any map can show. You're told this is a strategic withdrawal, that supplies will meet you, that warmer lands wait, that Napoleon has a plan. But from the moment your boot hits that frozen road, you feel it. Something has shifted. The sky is gray, permanently gray. The clouds hang low, pressing against the rooftops as if trying to smother what remains. The wind cuts and keeps cutting. It finds the holes in your coat. It whispers under your collar. It carries the scent of wood smoke and defeat. Your hands hurt, not just cold, but the kind of cold that gnaws. You wrap them in scraps of cloth. Someone gives you a piece of fur. Another man wraps his arms in pages from a Russian Bible. Everyone is improvising now. The retreat isn't orderly. The Grande Armée, once a clockwork machine of discipline and precision, has unraveled into a long, broken thread of men, horses, wagons, and memories. There are no clear lines, no neat formations, just clusters of movement, of breath, of boots scraping frozen mud. You walk past the ruins you once marched through, towns that look even emptier now, forests that seem to lean in closer. The same snow falls on everything, erasing footprints as fast as they're made, and the food gone. The last of it burned, looted, or rotted in Moscow. You chew hard biscuit until your jaw aches. You boil leather. You steal turnips from each other in the dark. You hope for frozen potatoes, hidden caches, kind strangers. Mostly, you don't find them. And then come the first deaths, not from battle, from cold. One morning, a man doesn't rise. His face looks peaceful, as if he simply chose not to wake. Someone tries to take his boots. A scuffle breaks out. You don't intervene. You understand? That day, your nose bleeds from the cold. Your skin cracks at the corners of your mouth. Your breath stings your lungs. And then come the horses. They begin to fall, first from exhaustion, then starvation, then frost. You pass. Carcasses buried in snowdrifts, legs stiff, eyes glassy. Some are eaten, others become sleds. You help drag a makeshift cart made from 2 broken wheels and half a door. The pace slows. The snow deepens. You cross rivers frozen at the edges, cracking in the middle. You sleep huddled in piles of bodies, not always sure who's alive. The only warmth now is each other, and even that is in short supply. Napoleon rides ahead. Rumor says he's fine, warm, fed, unbothered. Some say he's planning a great counterattack. Others say he's already thinking about Paris. A few believe he'll abandon the army and flee. Historians still argue about the decisions made during the retreat, whether the path was wrong, the pace too slow, the logistics too blind to reality. Some say it was hubris. Others say it was just too big, too far, too cold. You stop caring about debates. You care about finding something dry to burn, a scarf to wrap around your nose, a crumb one day. You find a loaf of bread, frozen solid, half buried in snow. It's old, maybe moldy. You eat it anyway. You don't tell anyone. You don't feel guilty. The days blur. You lose track of time, of distance, of yourself. You forget what month it is. You forget your name. You remember only that you are moving, and that if you stop, you die. The road is a ribbon of frost and silence, and then comes the wind down. You trudge through the snow, and slowly the footsteps around you fade. The air grows softer, muffled by the thick white drift. Even the wind, once so sharp and cruel, calms into a low hush, like the sound of the world taking a breath. You pause beside a broken wagon, the wood half buried beneath powdery snow. Above you, the sky is wide and quiet, the clouds heavy but unmoving. A single bird circles overhead, its wings spread like a distant prayer. You sit, not from defeat, but from a need to be still. Your coat is stiff, but it holds in the warmth. Your breath steams gently in the air. Around you, the men of the Grande Armée move like shadows, slow, deliberate, tired, but alive. Somewhere, a fiddle begins to play. Just a few notes, then silence. Then again, like a lullaby from a memory. That isn't quite yours. You lean back against the wheel, and for the first time in days, maybe weeks, you feel still, not safe, not home, but held in the arms of frost, under a sky of ash, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of footsteps and snowflakes. The war is not over. Rest never lasts, not here, not on this road. The snow may fall gently, but it does not forgive. And by now, winter is not just a season. It is the enemy. The march resumes, slowly, mechanically, each man locked in his own rhythm of survival. Your legs move because they remember how. Your mind floats behind, too tired to argue. The boots ahead of you leave tracks that fill with snow before you can step in them. You are cold, always, not the surface cold of early frost, but the soul-deep freeze that seeps into bone and thought. Your fingertips go numb and stay that way. You check them each morning, just to be sure they're still there. One man beside you doesn't. By nightfall, his are black. Frostbite becomes a companion. So do coughing fits, starvation, dreams, whispered prayers to saints you'd forgotten. You knew. The rhythm of the march becomes all there is. Step, breath, shiver, step, you come to a river. The Berezina, its name will mean nothing to you at first. Just another icy obstacle, another frozen thread across a broken land. But soon it will mean everything, because the Russians are coming. They've finally stopped retreating. Now they circle, and from behind and ahead the enemy closes in. You are no longer advancing. You are surrounded. The army reaches the riverbank, and the engineers begin to work, sawing through ice, building makeshift bridges with the last of the tools, the last of the energy, the last of Napoleon's illusions. You watch them, half admiring, half despairing, because the river is not calm, and the men are not fast, and the Russians are very close. The crossing becomes chaos. Men rush the bridges before they're ready. Wagons overturn. Horses scream and flail in the freezing current. Some try to swim and vanish beneath the ice. Others shove, push, climb over each other in desperation. There is no dignity here, no formation, just the animal urgency to live. You wait for your turn, clutching your pack tighter than your rifle. Behind you, the sound of gunfire grows. Ahead, the bridges creak and groan under the weight. You pray for wood to hold, for ice to stay. Historians still argue how many died at Berezina. Estimates vary wildly. Some say thousands, others say tens of thousands. What's agreed is that it marked the collapse of order. Napoleon makes it. Across, you eventually follow. You don't remember the exact moment your boots touch the far bank. You don't remember who helped you, or who fell, or what you left behind. All you remember is cold water up to your knees, a scream behind you, and the feeling that you should not be alive. Once across, the army doesn't pause. It can't. The enemy is still near, and now the road has changed. It's no longer a path toward home. It's a graveyard you haven't entered yet. The men are fewer, thinner, taught quieter. You pass groups that no longer walk. They sit, huddled under scraps of cloth, snow piling on their shoulders. Some stand in place, swaying. One man is frozen mid-step, 1 foot forward, eyes still open. You keep moving, because you must, because your body still answers some distant drumbeat that hasn't stopped yet, because somehow you are still among the living. By now, the army has no shape. What once was the Grande Armée, the pride of France, the engine of conquest, is now a broken string of ghosts trailing across white plains. No uniforms, no ranks, just clusters of frostbitten men walking westward in silence. You no longer recognize your unit. The flags are gone. The drums have been silent for weeks. The officers, if still alive, walk just like everyone else, heads low, beards untrimmed, their boots wrapped in rags. You pass men you've marched with for months and barely recognize their faces. You're not sure if they recognize yours. The snow is deeper now. Every step pulls. Your knees burn. Your thighs ache. You fall behind, catch up, fall behind again. Sometimes you think you see a familiar face ahead, a friend, a tentmate, someone you used to joke with, only to realize it's a tree or a hallucination. One afternoon, someone begins to sing. It's a soft hum at first, then a low song in some dialect you don't know. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm helps. For a few minutes, everyone walks in time. No one speaks, just that melody, like a lullaby for the dead. The song ends. No. One asks for more. You come upon a village, or what's left of one, a collection of collapsed roofs and half-burned walls. It's the kind of place you used to pass without a second glance. Now it's a treasure. A few doors remain standing. Someone finds a bed frame, and you light the slats for warmth. You tear curtains for bandages. One man boils wallpaper to scrape. off whatever starch remains. You eat it in one cottage. You find a child's doll, a little wooden horse. You hold it for a second, then leave it. You stay one night, maybe two, long enough to lose the momentum in your legs, long enough for frost to set into a comrade's foot. By morning, he can't walk. You leave him behind. There is no ceremony for these things anymore. Historians still debate the retreat's death toll. Some estimate fewer than 30,000 men made it back across the Niemen River, out of an original force of over 400,000. But exact numbers don't capture the feeling, the sheer emptiness of what's left. And it's not just men. The cannons are gone, left behind. Too heavy, too cold, too fire. The horses, if not eaten, lie in the snow like statues. The maps are useless now. The road changes every day, buried under snowdrifts and dreams. Even time has warped. Days blend together. You mark time by injuries. That was the day your toe went numb. That was the day the corporal collapsed. That was the day someone made soup out of candle wax. Your world has shrunk to one step, then the next. And yet, some part of you still clings to the rhythm, still hopes, because you've begun to hear rumors, faint and improbable. They say Napoleon is leaving. Not the army, not entirely, but heading west ahead of the column. That he's disguising himself. That he'll travel fast, light, with a small group of men. That he plans to reach Paris before the news does. At first, it sounds like nonsense, a frost-addled fantasy. But then an officer confirms it. The emperor is gone. You pause when you hear it, not out of anger or betrayal or even surprise, just a long breath, a nod. You understand? Because winter doesn't respect crowns, and history doesn't wait for its authors. You keep walking. The path is still long, the snow still deep, but the border is coming, and with it, the idea of an ending, maybe. The sky lightens, not by much, and not with warmth, but you begin to notice a subtle shift. The blizzards come less frequently now. The snow, though still deep, begins to crust in the mornings. The wind, while sharp, no longer cuts straight through to your ribs. You tell yourself, this is what hope feels like. Then someone dies beside you in their sleep, and you remember to keep your hope small. You march through the ruins of Poland, the same roads you once thundered across on your way to glory. Only now, you walk them in reverse, barely walking at all. You recognize some landmarks, a crooked tree near a frozen stream, a crossroads where you once bivouacked, but they look different now, like reflections of memories in cracked ice, smaller, sadder, covered in death. Every mile west is a mile gained, but the losses are unrelenting. Each morning, the group is smaller. You don't always notice at first. It's only when someone fails to complain about their boots or mutter about cheese that you realize they're gone. You think about turning back sometimes, but to what? A trail of bodies, frozen horses, your own shadow. No, you go forward, or you don't go at all. Somewhere in the distance, Cossack patrols still linger. You haven't seen them lately, but you feel their presence, like wolves at the edge of the woods. You travel quieter now. Fewer fires, fewer songs, just the muffled stomp of exhausted men trying not to be noticed by the cold or the past. And yet, there is a flicker, a rumor stronger than the others. A town ahead, not destroyed, not empty, occupied by allies. You don't believe it. You've been burned too many times by false reports, by broken bridges, by the sky itself. But still, your pace quickens. Then, one morning, a scent hits you that stops you in your tracks. Bread, not dream bread, not memory bread. Actual bread, baking, somewhere ahead. Your eyes sting. The smell is coming from a chimney. Real smoke, real heat, not desperation fire, but domestic warmth. You round a corner and see a village that is somehow still whole. People talking, walking, carrying baskets. You blink hard. You're not dreaming. The villagers are wary, but they don't run. Some bring water, some bring food, others just watch in silence. You think they're trying to decide whether you're soldiers or ghosts. One woman gives you a heel of rye bread. You don't cry, but you come close. That night, you sleep indoors. Walls, roof, straw mattress. It's the best night of sleep you've had since Vilna. Your body twitches. Not from cold this time, but from the shock of slowing down when you wake. Your boots are dry. You can't believe it. You begin to believe, just a little, that you might actually reach home. Historians still debate what saved the remnants of the army: luck, geography, or sheer stubbornness. Some say the pursuit weakened. Others say local resistance eased. Some credit discipline, even as it frayed. But you credit this. The rhythm of footsteps. Left, right, breathe. Left, right, hope. The men are quiet now. Not broken, just emptied. They speak softly, help each other over icy streams. Someone finds a dog and names it Marshall Snowball. It's not funny. And yet, everyone smiles. You pass more villages. Some wave. Others close their shutters. You understand both reactions. And then, one dawn, you hear it. French, taught, proper, clear, full-throated French. Not muttered or delirious, or fractured by cold. Spoken in full sentences. From an officer on horseback. You've crossed the line. You are in France. No parade greets you, no cheering crowds, no brass bands, just the soft sound of hooves, the clatter of wheels, and the sharp intake of breath from a man who never thought he'd see his own country again. You fall to your knees, not out of prayer, out of pure, unbelieving relief, and just like that, you begin to become yourself again. Asterisk, you don't speak for a while, even with your fellow survivors, the ones who trudged beside you across frozen rivers, who shared bark stew, and the last square of cloth words feel ... unnecessary, or too fragile, because what would you say? That was something. Glad that's over. No. You just sit together near a small fire, not needing to explain. You're somewhere in eastern France now, not yet home, but in range of letters, soup, and familiar faces. And for the first time in months, you sleep without one eye open. Your body begins to thaw, but your mind stays cold for a while longer. It's strange, this in-between place. You're no longer dying, but you're not exactly alive either. Not in the way you remember. You still eat quickly, like it might be your last meal. You still flinch at the sound of cracking ice. You still dream of boots, and always snow. Even when it rains now, you think it's snow at first. The villages in France are warmer, not just in temperature, but in tone. People are hesitant at first. Your ragged uniforms and hollow eyes don't exactly scream liberator, but when they hear what happened, the real version, their expressions change. Pity, horror, disbelief, they say. But you reached Moscow. You say, yes, They say, and then you say, then it ended. Historians still puzzle over that too. The strange silence that followed Napoleon's retreat. A campaign so grand, so devastating, and yet so muffled in its immediate aftermath. Perhaps people didn't know how to speak about what had happened. Perhaps they still don't. You're given a blanket, you're given a bath, and you cry in it, not loud. Just a few quiet tears that fall into the warm water without fanfare. You haven't seen yourself in a mirror in months. When you finally do, you don't recognize the man looking back. Older, paler, a touch of something shame, wisdom, cold, still clinging behind the eyes. You get a haircut. You put on civilian clothes. Your body thanks you. But your boots still feel more familiar than shoes. You begin the journey to your town, or village, or city. Whatever's left, you try not to think too far ahead. You just follow the rhythm again. Road, wind, breath. As you walk, you begin to remember things. The name of your childhood dog, the taste of wine, the way the leaves sounded in summer. Before all the marching began, you pass a bakery and almost collapse. Not from hunger this time, from the smell of normal yeast, apples, firewood. You want to bottle it and carry it with you forever. The baker gives you a crust. You eat it slowly. Your home comes into view. You stop for a long while before entering. Just stand there, staring. It hasn't changed much. Or maybe it has. You can't quite tell. You run your fingers along the gate. You're not sure if you're knocking or leaning. Then someone opens the door, and for the first time in forever, you are no longer a soldier. You are just you. You never expected to be a story. You were just one man in a long line of men, following orders, marching east, then west, then nowhere at all. But once you're home, back in your village, your apartment, your farmhouse, your quiet corner of the map, people look at you like you carry something sacred and strange. You sit at a table. Someone places a warm bowl in front of you. Soup with actual vegetables, maybe even meat. Your hands shake as you lift the spoon, and someone asks you gently, "So, what was it like?" You try to answer, but the words feel too small, too clean. You say cold, and that doesn't cover it. You say long, and that's not the word either. You say we lost a lot, and feel your throat close halfway through. So instead, you say nothing, just eat your soup. You notice how soft the chair is, how clean the floor is, how loud birds can be when you haven't heard them in months. Sleep is odd now. Your body wants it, craves it, but your mind has learned to stay alert. You wake at the sound of the wind, expecting orders, or gunfire, or footsteps in the snow. But it's just a breeze shaking the shutters. You get up anyway. Not everyone returns home. That's the unspoken truth. For every man who comes limping through the village gate, 10 more are left behind, frozen in fields, scattered across forests, buried by snow or by history. But for those who do return, there's a kind of map inside them now, invisible but always present. A map of rivers crossed, battles stumbled through, nights survived under indifferent stars. You become part of a quiet club. Those who went and came back. You recognize each other without words. In a crowd, you spot a man who lost the same 3 fingers you did. You both nod. Once. That's enough. Historians later call you survivors, veterans, the miraculously returned. Some even romanticize it, speak of glory, endurance, the triumph of will. You remember boiling belts for dinner and keep your mouth shut. Newspapers, print stories. Napoleon releases bulletins that emphasize strategy and minimize loss. A tactical retreat, he calls it, preserving the army for future battles. He praises your resilience. He decorates what's left of your unit. Someone pins a medal to your chest. You don't remember the speech. Later, someone asks if you met Napoleon. You shrugged. Once, maybe, from a distance. You hear he's already planning again. Always planning. Spain, Germany, politics shifting like sand. You don't care. You have a roof. You have shoes. You have mornings where you wake up and the air doesn't hurt. That's enough. Sometimes you sit in the sun and trace the seams of your old coat. You think of the man who gave you a bite of turnip in Minsk, the one who sang. On the march, the officer who froze, standing up, the baker in Smolensk who hid a loaf beneath the floorboards. You don't tell many people about them, but you remember, and memory now is a kind of peace. Life continues. You're not sure how. At first, it just does. You wake up, you wash your face, you fix the door that never quite closed right. The chickens need feeding, the roof leaks. The world, incredibly, has the audacity to be ordinary again. And you try to fit back into it, but it's like putting on a coat that used to be yours. Same buttons, same smell, only now it pinches in the shoulders. Something doesn't sit right. You nod in conversations. You laugh at the right moments. You go to market. You carry firewood. But somewhere deep inside, you're still on the road. That long, white road. You don't talk about it much. When people ask, you give them a version, a softer one. You skip over the days with no food, the frozen men, the bone-deep silence. You just say, it was bad, and they nod, not asking for more. It's enough for them. It isn't for you. One day you find yourself tracing the cracks in a teacup, your fingers moving over them like ridges on a map. You realize you've been staring at it for 10 minutes. You laugh quietly. The cracks look like rivers, like roads, like the ones that led you to Moscow and back. You see others like you, a man limping across a bridge, another with an eye that won't focus, a woman who still ties her bread in cloth knots just in case. You're not alone in your dislocation. You're part of a strange brotherhood of returners, scattered, quiet, marked in ways the census can't count. Historians will one day try to define it. The Russian campaign of 1812, the retreat from Moscow, Napoleon's biggest mistake. They'll tally the dead, estimate the frostbite, argue over supply lines and cavalry ratios. They'll try to make it legible, but for you, it's not legible, it's tactile. It's the way your shoulders tense when someone slams a door. The way winter smells different now. The way you always keep a crust of bread hidden in your coat pocket, even in summer. One day a child asks you, "Did you fight in Russia?" You pause. You look at their round face, their clean fingers, the way they squint at you, like you're already a story. You say, "Yes." They say, "Was it scary?" You say, "A little." Then you smile. "But I came back." They nod, satisfied. Then they run off, chasing something in the dust. You sit back in your chair, warmed by the sun, and let the silence settle around you. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like peace, not absence. Seasons pass. Winter comes again, but it's different now. You feel it in your bones, sure, but also in your mind, in your habits. in the way you stack firewood just a little higher than necessary, the way you check the sky each morning, half expecting smoke or snow or silence. You've become a man of weather and memory. Your neighbors prepare for the cold with routine. They joke about frozen feet. You force a smile, but inside you're watching the tree line, remembering how sound disappears in snow, how quiet can mean danger. Still, you adapt. You build things, fix things, trade stories at the tavern. Most are new politics, love, gossip, but occasionally someone tells a story from the campaign, a moment, a place, a name. You recognize it. You say nothing. You don't need to claim it. You've lived it. Others, DIDN, single quotes, TR, names are still missing from letters. Families still hope for news. Some don't know if their sons froze, were captured, or simply disappeared. In the absence of facts, rumors take root. Whole myths grow like moss on the stones of memory. Napoleon, of course, returns to Paris. He spins the story with precision, talks of glory, of strategy. He pins medals on chests. He blames the weather, the Tsar, betrayal, logistics, and in truth, he's not entirely wrong, but he's not entirely right either. Historians still argue about the causes, the failures of planning, the brutality of the Russian retreat, the role of Cossacks, the scorched earth strategy, but they rarely ask what it was like. That's where you live now, in the like losing track of time, like forgetting the color green, like dreaming of bread so often you wake up chewing air. You have new habits. You always sit facing the door. You carry flint, even in summer. You never waste soup. Your coat has secret pockets now, little hiding places for coins, for cloth, for the things you promised yourself you'd never need again, but carry, just in case. Sometimes you walk the edge of the woods and find yourself tracing the horizon, still looking east, still listening for drums that never come. But there's healing in small things, a warm drink, a child's laughter, a good pair of dry socks. One morning you find a letter waiting on your doorstep from someone you thought lost, a man who made it back months after you. He writes of silence, of snow, of the same brittle peace. He signs it simply, still here. You smile, you write back, me too. The pen shakes a little, but the ink holds. Asterisk years pass, not all at once, but slowly, in the creak of floorboards, the tilt of the sun, the way the same boots wear down along the same path to the well. You become older, wiser, they say, though you suspect it's just a different kind of tired. Napoleon rises again, then falls, then rises again, then finally, truly, falls. The news comes slowly, as all big news does in small places. You hear of Waterloo from a baker who heard it from a merchant who saw it printed in lion. You nod, you exhale, you say, it had to end somewhere, somewhere. That word sits strange on your tongue, because for you, it didn't end in a battlefield. It ended in the snow, in a burned-out village, in a bridge groaning over ice, in a silence so loud it became part of you. You are not famous. You don't write a memoir. You don't give speeches. You just live. But when the children of the village gather around and ask about the war, you give them pieces, only the softer ones. You tell them about the fox you saw outside Vilna, the man who played violin in a blizzard, the way soup tasted when someone found a clove. You don't tell them about the doll. Frozen 2, AWINDOWSILL. Or the officer who walked until his legs cracked open. You let those memories stay where they are, folded into the silence between breaths. 1. Winter, you grow ill, just a cough at first. Then days of sweating. Someone brings herbs, someone else offers prayers. You stay mostly quiet, watching the frost build on the corners of the window. You count icicles like candles. You think of the men you left behind. You wonder if anyone else remembers them the way you do, not as numbers or ranks, but as faces, laughs, sighs. The men who helped carry a wounded horse, who shared the last crust, who fell asleep sitting up because there was no ground dry enough to lie down on one night. You dream you're walking again, but this time it's spring. The road is clear, the trees are budding, and there are no boots ahead of you, no howling wind behind, just the soft sound of home calling you forward. You wake before you reach it. That's okay, you know the way now. Time becomes soft at the edges. You don't measure it in hours anymore, or even seasons. You measure it in smells, fresh bread, chimney smoke, warm hay, in textures, wool blankets, wooden spoons, the worn grip of a walking stick. Your life is small now, but it fits you well. You take slow walks, watch the river, sit under a tree and trace the bark with your thumb. Some days you speak, some days you don't. There's no rush, no commands, no snow to fear. But still, every now and then, your fingers twitch for a rifle that isn't there, and your boots, the new ones, warm and well-stitched, somehow never feel as honest as the ones that carried you through Belarus, through the edge of nowhere, through silence and back. People call you lucky, and maybe you are, but the thing they don't understand, the thing no one ever quite gets, is that luck feels heavier than it sounds. To be lucky is to have seen the others fall. To be lucky is to carry names in your chest like little stones you don't dare put down. To be lucky is to remember even when it hurts. Historians will one day say the Russian campaign changed Europe, that it cracked the illusion of French invincibility, that it bled Napoleon's empire dry, that it rewrote the rules of war in frost and fire. But they rarely say it changed you, that it carved new grooves into your soul, that it shifted the way you listen to silence, that it taught you how loud a snowflake can be when it lands on your sleeve in the dead of night. You live through quiet revolutions now. You learn to make jam, to mend socks, to fall asleep without your back to a wall. You learn to laugh again, real laughter, belly deep and wrinkled around the eyes. You even learn to sing quietly, the way that one soldier did as he marched through sleet. And one day you hear a storm outside and don't flinch. You just pull the blanket higher and sip your tea. You think of the road, yes, always, but you also think of this, that it ended, that you survived it, that you came home. You close your eyes and rest your hand over your chest, where so many memories are tucked into the folds, still here, still warm, still walking, even if only in dreams. Asterisk, you become a story, not right away, not in the way you expect, but slowly, over time, as the world spins forward and younger voices grow curious. You're not the soldier anymore. You're the old man with the cane, the quiet one, the one who knows things no one else talks about. You don't mind, in fact. It feels appropriate. People don't ask you for facts. They ask you for moments. They want to know what snow sounded like under exhausted feet, what horses looked like when they refused to keep going, what silence in an empty Russian village felt like. You answer softly, not everything, just enough. You keep the rest folded inside, not out of secrecy, but out of respect. The road was long, the snow was deep, the price was paid now. You sip warm broth from a chipped bowl and watch the world move on. Napoleon is in exile again, or maybe he's dead. Depending on when the post arrives, you lose track, not out of age, but out of distance. He was the sun once radiant, central, inescapable. But now the world turns without him, and you, surprisingly, don't miss it. Instead, you miss the sound of shared footsteps, the rustle of frostbitten coats, the quiet camaraderie of those who knew how bad it was and kept walking anyway. Sometimes you think about writing it all down, but then you realize you already have, in the way you move, the way you notice wind, the way your hands pause over a loaf of bread like it's sacred. You've carried the campaign with you, not in pages, but in posture. You walk differently now. Even your sleep has a rhythm, a gentle sway, a silent march. And when the children ask again, always the children, because adults forget to wonder, you tell them what they're ready to hear, not the deaths, not the cold, but the fire that burned from saddle leather, the soup made from candles, the bridge that cracked but didn't break. And then, when the story ends, you tell them the most important thing: I came back, because that's what they need to hear, that someone did, that someone could. You grow quiet in your old age, not because you've run out of things to say, but because the world finally knows how to listen without noise. You sit beneath a tree, same one as always. Your coat is warm, the breeze gentle. Your eyes close. You dream of a long road. Only this time, you're not alone. Men walk beside you, smiling, whole, marching toward a fire, a meal, a soft place to lie down. You smile, too. You know the way. The hat is gone, the medals forgotten. Only the rhythm remains. Left, right, home. If you're still here, that means this story found its way to you. Don't forget to subscribe, tap the like, and let me know where you're listening from. Thank you for joining me on this little time travel. Sleep well.